All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with two people who have been on the show before, but I think in a very different context. The band we're talking about was last on the show in 2021, but one of the people here on the call was on the show probably way back to like 2016 or 15 or something. So I think we need to get some context as to who I'm talking to here and what we're talking about. So if the two of you want to introduce yourselves and give a bit of background about why we're here today and what we're talking about, that would be a great way to start. So whoever feels like
Sure.
going first.
I'll hit it. I'm Nick Luchak. I'm the drummer and uh, guru of Zrada, um, which is the primary Ukrainian folk rock uh, band based in Winnipeg, making weirdo music based on uh, somewhat traditional Slavic, Eastern European uh, traditions in our own twisted way.
Cool.
And so, for context, we recently restructured the band entirely. So we lost two members about a year ago, just over a year ago, who started their own side project of like crazy uh, 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 death metal, I guess they'd call it. It's called Forms if you want to look them up.
Cool.
It's pretty technical death metal, I think. Um, and so we were kind of like left not sure what we should do. We had this unrecorded material that we had worked with them on, and then kind of like had discussions with them and the band, and kind of coaxed them to come back and help us record these tracks and put this EP together. And then in the midst of doing all of this, we kind of started piecing the band together with some new members. Dan, of which is one of them that we're very very blessed to have playing with us. So it's been really awesome. So it's kind of interesting, like with this project, with the Old Ways, the CP that we just put out. We It's kind of like this. It's called the Old Ways because it's kind of putting the cap on this era of the band and the way that it sounded in this kind of heavier, proggier kind of thing. And then while we were recording that, piecing together this new piece, we're now a seven-piece band. Um, and like working on the old material with it, but also starting to jam on new stuff and seeing which
Cool.
way it goes. So it's just been a very cool experience. So yeah, we're kind of here uh, talking about the old ways and the new ways, and yeah, Dan, if you want to.
Well, yeah, and Dan, as I
Yeah,
alluded to earlier, I mean, you've been on the show before, but it was almost a decade ago, I think now. So, maybe reintroduce yourself and then what your role is in this reconfigured version of this band.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's great to be back on. I love following all of the nitty gritty that you get into, Sam, with
Oh,
the
thanks.
scene here. It's so sweet. And yeah, I think it's almost been a decade. It's like 2015, I want to
Something
say.
like that. Yeah, it's been a while.
Or 2016 was like, I think maybe the second time I was on, which is ridiculous.
It
That,
is.
what time doth fly, and the shred keeps shredding. So I'm stepping in as one of the new additions to Zrada. Um, and that he approached me, I guess, like 6 months ago or something along those lines, maybe not quite so long ago, with the idea that there was going to be like a new iteration of this project, and um, knowing that there was going to be a booking for Festival de Voyageurs coming up, and wanted to flesh out that lineup. And I mean, this has been like one of my favorite Winnipeg bands for as long as I can remember. There's been like, I think two or three shows that I've seen. A couple of them were at the Times Change specifically, where it absolutely blew like the lid off the place. And I just didn't know that this kind of righteous combination of like, ethno folk rock with just like a little peppering of prog
Yeah.
existed in the world, and let alone like right in the same city. So it was just like, and yeah, I don't know, weirdly like a dream come true to get a chance to shred with these lads, because I've kind of like set down my heavier axes in exchange for like a banjo and a mandolin. I've been making like folk music for a
Yeah.
living for the last decade or so, like playing a lot of bluegrass and bluegrass adjacent old time music. But before that, I toured with a metal band called Entre Parenthèses with my brothers, and I was a drummer for that band. And like I still eat metal for breakfast. It's like my go-to concentration music, like if
Yeah.
I need to relax, I put on like the techiest, deathiest stuff I can find, and it just like brings me to my happy place. So this project is like kind of the perfect combination of the two of like, the folk aspect where taking like traditional Slavic style melodies and rhythms and bridging them with like a modern, heavier, edgier sound. I can't imagine a better drug.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, how do you fit in as far as the cultural side of things? Because I mean, I know, like you said, you're sort of known in Winnipeg and beyond as a folk musician. I mean, mandolin, banjo, all these instruments that are not necessarily something that you think about when you think of heavier music. But I mean, this is a band that is very much focused on traditional, like reworking traditional Slavic music, right? Do you have any kind of
Yeah.
family background with that stuff, or are you sort of now getting like a quick primer on what the stories are, what the background is, and all that?
Amazing question, honestly. Just a little tidbit on my background. Like I'm from a town called St. Rose du Lac. It's out by Dauphin area, and Dauphin is, as some of your listeners might know, is location. It's right nearby Silla, Ukraine, which is, and there's a Ukrainian festival that happens there
Right, right.
every year. It's like one of the largest, like outside of Ukraine itself, and it is an absolute banger of a party. And a lot of Western Manitoba was settled by waves of like French and Ukrainian immigrants, and so every second town in part of Manitoba where I grew up, it's like two adjacent. It's like literally one after another. It's like French, Ukrainian, the entire way out there. So like they're all in of the Catholic bent, but
Right,
some are more
right.
Orthodox than others. So, uh, but every little town has either like just like a traditional church or the onion top, and you always know driving into town what you're getting into. Either it's going to be meat pie or it's going to be pierogies.
Right, right. So
So
you experienced it all like as a neighbor basically to it.
totally. So it was entirely peripheral, ultimately. So I have a lot of pals that are steeped in the tradition, and every time there was the festival, I'd always go and check out the dancing and the traditional music. But I never played any of it because it wasn't really my bag at the
Yeah,
time. But now, like as an adult, having delved through like series of like Irish folk music and a lot of English stuff, and going back to like my own cultural roots of like fiddle music from the prairies,
yeah.
delving into this kind of stuff, it is a bit of like a it's a quick kind of just like drinking like a power juice from a blender, like having all of these amazing melodies that are in modes that I'm not necessarily used to. Also, but like me and the other lads, like the other newcomers, are all francophones.
Okay.
Also, and like we've got our own tradition of fiddle music, and we access like a certain uh, uh, how would you say, like a bag of tricks, like certain number of scales and chords that like
Sure,
my
yeah,
fingers are
yeah.
used to playing. But all of like this Slavic stuff has got these just absolutely jagged melodies that are just so foreign to my fingers and to my ears that it's just so righteous. So it's really stretching my brain and my abilities. It's like the thing that I'm just so excited to play. And having the fact that this group has existed for so long and they're such consummate professional musicians,
Yeah.
it just the initial iteration of it is already so tight. So like having such a like steady platform to learn on is kind of like makes a challenging task just
Well,
joyful.
it's kind of cool to hear that there's this like francophone infusion into this band, because I'm curious how that's going to play out sort of in the future when you start recording more with this lineup, and seeing how that's going to seep in, because I think it will, no matter what, right? I mean, it's gonna, because you're all there, it's gonna weasel its way
Totally.
into the
Well,
Ukrainian thing.
you will see a very deliberate match of those things if you come to the show at Festival on Friday, because we're doing a show with Flora Luna. We're doing a song with Flora Luna guesting that's going to be half in Ukrainian, half in French, which is kind of wild for us to do anything outside of fully Ukrainian tracks.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the perfect opportunity to do something like this. And with the new members in our band, it just all makes sense. But to your point, like Dan is so interesting that like, it's more. it's indicative of like the Manitoba experience or this like rural like folk cultural thing. Like it having this French culture stuff involved. Maybe it'll seep into the music itself too. We'll
Yeah.
see. It's kind of interesting because like the MO of the band obviously started as this Ukrainian thing, but we're always open to collaboration, like seeing where things go. And we're doing a song that has French in it, so
Cool.
yeah, we'll record it in the future, but we'll be playing it live Friday. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about before we even sat down to do this is the last time you were on the show. I do want to talk about the new EP, and we're gonna get to it. But the last time you were on the show talking about this band, it was 2021, and obviously things surrounding Ukraine and being Ukrainian have changed drastically in the time since then. Has that had an impact? I mean, I know it's a whole situation that's not we're not able to get into in the context of this podcast, but what's going on in Ukraine and the impact it's had on the diaspora of Ukrainians and that kind of thing. Has that impacted the music that you guys have been playing and writing and sort of the attitude towards performing this more traditional stuff?
Certainly, it has. I would say in terms of, well, first and foremost, I would say that like it's solidified in the concept of digging our heels in more and like wanting to protect the culture. And
Sure.
um, when the war started, I can't remember. Yeah, after the war started, we even discussed as a band like what we should be doing. Everyone was at different places in terms of how they were feeling about everything and having their energy sucked out of them and where their families were. Um, and so there was just a lot of discussion around how we should act, what we should do. So we ended up putting a benefit concert together at the Park Theater, and just kind of saying like we have to show our support. Like
Yeah.
we are this monolithic thing. Whether people know about us or not, like we stand for this thing in the city, and we should make a statement and do something about it. Whether our music itself isn't really political. It's hard for me to speak to it. Andriy, the politician, writes most of the lyrics,
Right.
but some of it comes out in the aggression in the songs. And certainly, those first couple shows we were playing, getting back into things, like there's a lot more emotion that came out while we were playing, and it certainly is at times like it's not over; it's still going on. It's a travesty. Um, but the music itself isn't political in its content, but in its context, it
Yeah.
is. And in the way that we, want to just keep promoting the culture and showing people what it is to be Ukrainian. So, yeah, yes and no.
Sure. Yeah, and I know it's a bigger question than we have time for here in terms of what we're talking about. But have you had? I mean, I know there's been a pretty large influx of Ukrainians direct from Ukraine coming here to Manitoba. Have you found newcomers checking out your band or discovering it by accident or stumbling upon this weird sort of Ukrainian thing that's happening in Winnipeg that is maybe I'm assuming is quite different from what they're hearing locally?
Honestly, it's hard to say right now because we haven't really played
Sure.
live. You
Sure.
know, we haven't been playing, so we haven't really been seeing who's been coming out. So it's hard to say who's even hearing us or dropping that. I certainly hope that we're able to reach an audience of new immigrants because I think they'd have a good time. I
Yeah.
think it'd be really cool to make that crossover. We don't know yet. We'll see if there's a turnout on Friday, maybe, and yeah, I don't know. Like, it's certainly an aspect of an audience we want to reach out to and
Yeah.
and connect with a bit more. And certainly, we have more listeners across the pond since the war has started. Just looking at our Spotify information and stuff, like we get put on some certain playlists and there's pockets of spots in Europe that are listening to us more often. So it's kind of cool to see that.
Yeah, that is cool. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was about the members of the band leaving to form this technical death metal thing, and obviously there's always been heaviness in what you guys do as a band, but on this new EP, I think it was the last song. It's very very heavy, and it's just kind of like I think that was my favorite song on there, and it's really kind of I mean, a lot of them sort of have heavy parts, but then it goes more traditionally folky and stuff. But this was just kind of like boom, 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 heavy, in your face sort of vibe. Is that something that came from having those members in the band, or is that a direction that you guys are moving more towards with the current iteration?
Certainly, I think that exactly what you're saying. It's indicative of those guys being in the
Okay.
band previously, especially that main riff, like that punk riff that drives the song, that's written by Adam, our old guitar player. So that he brought that to the table, and he's one of the main songwriters for that track. So yeah, certainly the vibe of that thing kind of like helped drive. They brought the vibe of that like nasty punk riff, which is great, and then it collaboratively turned into this like maideny thing halfway through. So yeah, it is kind of more part of the the cap, the piece, just like saying that this is what we had sounded like as a band up until this point. But we're certainly going to continue playing those songs and working on things that are heavy and not heavy. So it's hard to say. Like we've been jamming all sorts of weird shit uh, while practicing once in a while. So who knows? I don't know, Dan. What do you think?
Weird shit in what way? Yeah, Dan. What do you want to hear you say about this as a newcomer to the band?
Totally. So I don't really have as much context for like what is weird or what is not as far as like, what's been done in the past. Like, I've listened to the recordings and I've seen the live show, but like the few times where we sort of like delve off the track once we've like, rehearsed what needed to be rehearsed and made sure that all the parts were in place, jams would naturally spontaneously combust almost. Like
Okay.
Nick came up with this, like he just started throwing down this like super jagged, like Dilla style stutter beat. And just because I had been playing like in Locrian mode this whole time, I like threw down like my interpretation of like what a Slavic riff would sound like. But because the beat was like a stutter beat, then it just like came out sounding like, I don't know, it just had this weird swagger to it, It was like more, it had like it had like a hip hop lean to it pretty hard, But then when like Mikas came in with the violin, having that traditional instrument on top, all this just gave it like such a bizarre flavor.
Okay.
So I guess like Frankensteiny. It's like hard to say because every time that like a spontaneous jam kicks out, it's like I don't know, it's weird. Like nothing I've ever really heard before. It just feels like raw creation, like with like a primordial soup of music.
Well,
It's
maybe
weird. I love it.
what I should ask earlier is what is the instrumentation like right now? Like, I mean, I know you've changed the lineup a little bit. What do you have as far as what people are playing in the band?
Well, still violin, accordion, drums, and he's playing trumpet and some guitar.
Okay.
But he's playing less guitar now because we have Joel playing lead guitar. What's Joel's last name?
Rivar.
Rivan, sorry. And Marco Freinet on bass. And then Dan is kind of switching between keys and guitars. So it's
Oh, cool. Okay.
still like the main kind of ethnic instruments that we're using are the violin, accordion, trumpet, some horn stuff, and then yeah, adding keys to the mix has been really interesting because in practice, like Dan's adding all this whole palette to the songs we've never had before, really running through everything. Like Lindsay's switched to keys for a few things here and there, but never consistently. So like we're playing our old songs and they're sounding a little bit different. We're adding different dynamic to them already. So it's interesting to see where the music is going already, having a new palette to play with in that way.
Well, as far as keys are concerned, I mean, when you say keys, I'm trying to picture what that sounds like within the context of what I've heard of your band before. I mean, is this like organ, or are we talking piano, or both, or like what sort of? I mean, maybe Dan, you can answer that, but what sort of sounds are you adding to this, and how does it sort of contribute to the overall vibe?
Yeah, initially it kind of just like came in with some organ stuff because like there were a few tracks that we were running right at the top that like had like kind of a ska feel, like in the sense of it was like everything that a polka is, but like with guitars and offbeats. So it's like,
Sure.
yeah, this like it's kind of got some goth and reggae to it. So like a bit more of like like the early run B3 type of organ. So like squishy with a little bit of Leslie to sort of thicken it up a little bit. And then some of the heavier stuff, it's been like full on like synth lead lines, like
Oh, cool.
jagged sawtooth, like screaming leads with delay. When it's my time to take a break for it. So yeah, I don't know. It's got a little bit of Deep Purple and maybe a little bit of Yes. I'd say it's like kind of the influences that I'm trying to
Oh,
draw from.
nice.
You
They start
know?
making you wear like a wizard outfit, like the dude from Yes.
Yeah,
That'd be amazing.
yeah. Wakeman,
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I got some sequin pieces I can pull out.
I believe it. I believe it.
Uh, yeah,
Um,
just like basically trying to be the glue ultimately, just like
sure.
keeping things thick and juicy because like the guitars will go off on their own routes and a lot of it can be like percussive and in the higher register. The one guitars will go higher end, then I tend to like sort of meet be the meat in the middle,
Yeah,
make sure the sandwich is a proper Reuben and not just like a bologna on Wonder Bread.
I like the
yeah.
analogies here. It's been pretty good the whole way through the analogies. So how does this, like, I guess, how does this affect this sound? I mean, I think we talked about this last time. Is that your band is so nebulous anyway in terms of what kind of music you play, because there's the punk stuff, because there's the prog stuff, there's obviously the traditional folk Slavic stuff. Is there? I mean, do you think that you have an audience that is sort of open to hearing maybe some crazy synth lines in the middle of a song? Like, is the crowd that listens to Zrada like primed for weirdness? Like, is that, do you think that comes with sort of being in a band that's diverse?
I should hope so. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Like, I think that really, as long as people can kind of move to it, as long as if we're responding to it, it's usually you see a response from it in an audience. Like, 'cause
Right.
even when we put weird songs together and we play them live, there's always like you'll see people in the audience like, "What the fuck? Like, this is weird," but into then people start getting into it, and so I think as long as we have, in a live show context, like we have bangers that are tried and true, we know we can pull them out and people will dance to them no matter
Yeah.
what. We can, as we're working on new material, we'll see what works and what doesn't, but I think people will be responsive to it just because it's kind of the way it's always gone. And yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'll be a new creative era, and in any case, like you said, we'll have possibly some hip hop influences. Might start using some drum machines. Might
Oh,
start
cool.
using some samples. There's been a lot of talk of just all the kinds of directions that we've been wanting to go in. So I think it'll be like a new creative awakening for the band, and I'm really excited to see what we started coming up with all these new members and the new palette that we have to play with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was the plan always to go ahead as the same band? I mean, even when people left, or was there ever a consideration of like starting something new, or did the older members, the more sort of long term members, did you guys just feel like, no, we have to keep this going and just add to it?
Kind of, yeah. Like, yeah, in the wake of losing two members, the four of us remaining had a lot of chat about it, and certainly came up the idea of whether we just give up entirely
Right.
and start something different, or we never really went that far down the path of talking about a new project and what that would turn into. I think Zrada as it stands is pretty malleable, and even while those other guys were still in the band, we always talked about the different directions we could pull the band in, and so in a way, it just like kind of creates a new opportunity to go in one of those directions. It takes away not that they're not the previous members are holding us back, but it's just like everyone has their own style and their own
Yeah, of
vibe and what
course.
they want the band to sound like, and so you know things are going to change no matter what. So I think we're just all excited to see what happens. Yeah.
Cool. And you've mentioned the festival show a few times. When most people hear this, that will have already happened. What do you have? Do you have anything else coming up? Are there plans to do more shows, sort of jumping off with this one? Because this sounds like this is the first one in a while, the festival show.
Yeah, this is our first one coming back. We will be playing Times Changed in April. Dan, do you know the date on that one?
Gotta pull it up in my calendar right
Well, you
now.
know what? That maybe I can connect that to another question, which is how do people find out more about what you're doing? Where should someone go if they're hearing about you for the first time here, or they're reminded of you and they want to know sort of where to find out about upcoming shows and things like that? What's the best option there?
Probably right now, the best option is to follow us on Instagram at Zrada Music on Instagram. That's probably our most active platform at the moment. We have a website, but I don't know if it's been updated in a while. We should
Yeah.
probably update it, which is zradamusic.com. Um, and then our Facebook kind of, but Instagram is the most active for sure. If you want to.
April 26th.
April 26th. The times change?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that'll be really the first like feature. I mean, Friday will be a feature set, but we only get 45 minutes, so this time we'll actually get to dig in, work
Yeah.
on some of our other songs, and do some weirder stuff. And yeah,
Awesome. Awesome.